On a bustling afternoon in Hanoi, a man in his 60s made his way through the busy streets, his figure barely noticeable among the crowd. He wore a faded shirt, torn trousers, and worn-out sandals. His hands shook as he gripped an old crooked cane, his steps slow and uneven. To anyone passing by, he seemed like just another beggar, a sad figure lost in the midst of the modern, fast-paced world. But appearances can be deceiving. Beneath the shabby clothes and the frail appearance of this man, Mr. Hien was anything but a beggar. He was a self-made businessman, the owner of a chain of luxury resorts in Quang Ninh worth billions. A man who had worked tirelessly for decades to build a successful life for himself, his family, and especially his only son. Recently, his son Min had introduced a young woman named Lin to the family. Lin worked at a clothing store described by Min as intelligent, independent, and gentle. Her background was humble, but there was something about her that caught Mr. Hien's attention. With his years of experience, he knew that things were rarely as simple as they seemed. Was she truly the kind, trustworthy person Min thought she was? Or was she someone only interested in the wealth his family had accumulated? Determined to find out, Mr. Hien came up with a plan to test her sincerity. He waited for over an hour, observing the ebb and flow of the crowd. The sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting a warm, golden hue over the city as the afternoon buzzed with life. Finally, he spotted Lin. She emerged from the store, looking fresh and vibrant. She was dressed simply but neatly, with a smile on her face that lit up the surroundings. Her demeanor was calm, and she spoke with her colleague in a friendly yet professional manner. Mr. Hien, standing at a distance, took a deep breath. He gripped his cane tighter, his heart racing. This was it. This was the moment when he would test her. He took a few steps forward, his movements slow and deliberate. He reached her just as she was about to pass. With a slight bow of his head, he extended his trembling hand towards her and spoke in a voice filled with quiet desperation. "Excuse me, could you spare a little money for bread? I am so hungry." Lin paused in her tracks. For a brief moment, her eyes widened in surprise. She glanced him up and down, assessing the situation. She seemed to hesitate, as if trying to understand the true nature of this man before her, but only for a moment. Within seconds, the hesitation melted away. Her face softened, and her expression became one of empathy. "Please wait for a moment," she said, her voice calm yet firm, as if assuring him that she would help. As she walked away, a colleague of Lin's, walking in the opposite direction, overheard their exchange. He looked at the scene with an air of disapproval. Shaking his head, he muttered, loud enough for both Mr. Hien and Lin to hear, "There are so many beggars these days. How long can you keep helping them? It never ends." Lin didn't respond to the comment. Instead, she gave a faint smile as if silently acknowledging the judgment and continued to walk toward Mr. Hien. After a moment, she reached into her bag and pulled out a few small bills, offering them to him. "Here," she said, her eyes filled with sincerity. "Please use this to buy something to eat." Mr. Hien's hand trembled as he took the money, his emotions stirred by the gesture. It was a simple act of kindness, but it spoke volumes. Still, he wasn't entirely convinced. To confirm her sincerity, he decided to test her further. He deliberately fumbled with the bills in his hand, letting one slip to the ground. The bill fluttered in the air before landing softly on the pavement. Lin immediately noticed. Her eyes widened, and without a second thought, she bent down, her fingers quickly retrieving the bill. She stood up, gently placing the note back into his hand, her voice kind but firm. "Be careful. Don't let it fall again." Mr. Hien was taken aback. The act was so genuine, so filled with care, that it left him speechless. It wasn't something someone could fake. This wasn't the behavior of someone pretending to be a beggar, nor was it a mere act of politeness. It was genuine concern, something he had rarely witnessed from others. But even so, Mr. Heian wasn't ready to make his final judgment. He wanted to be sure. So he decided to take things a step further. After receiving the money, he continued to stand there, watching Lin turn to walk away. Then, in a calculated move, he staggered as if suddenly dizzy. His cane slipped from his hand, and his body began to sway, as though he were about to collapse. Lin, having already taken a few steps away, immediately heard the sound of him stumbling. Without hesitation, she turned around, her face filled with concern. Her eyes scanned him quickly, and she rushed toward him, steadying him with both hands. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice full of worry. "Do you need help?" In that moment, Mr. Heian knew. He could feel her genuine concern. She didn't stop or hesitate. She didn't pretend to care. She acted quickly without any thought for herself, simply wanting to ensure he was all right. This wasn't something that could be faked. As she helped him regain his balance, Mr. Heian's heart swelled with admiration for her. He had seen enough. Lin was not just some naive young woman. She was someone with real heart, someone who cared about others, regardless of their status. And most importantly, she had passed his test. When Lin finally helped him back to his feet, he smiled warmly at her. The test was over. In his heart, he knew the truth. Lin had shown him who she really was, a kind, sincere, and compassionate person. She was indeed worthy of his son. As she walked away, Mr. Heian looked after her, a quiet sense of peace settling within him. His fears had been put to rest. Min had made a wise choice. Lin was the right person to be a part of their family. A man, weary and frail, rushed to the side of an elderly man who appeared unwell. With concern in his voice, he asked, "Are you okay? Do you need any help?" The elderly man, Mr. Heian, nodded weakly, his voice raspy. "I'm just feeling a little dizzy, probably because I haven't eaten today." Lin, looking at him with deep concern, suggested, "You should rest for a bit. Let me take you to a nearby clinic for a checkup." Mr. Heian shook his head slowly, his voice soft and fragile. No, I just need to sit for a moment. I don't want to trouble you any more than I already have." But Lin refused to leave him standing on the roadside. She glanced around and spotted a small PO restaurant nearby. "Come on," she said, gently guiding him toward it. "Why don't we go in and have a bite? I'll treat you." Mr. Heian hesitated but reluctantly allowed Lin to lead him inside. The restaurant wasn't large, but it was neat and cozy, with wooden tables arranged neatly. Lin helped him sit down, then quickly ordered a steaming bowl of pho. When the bowl arrived, she carefully placed it in front of him. Her voice was warm and kind as she said, "Please eat, it'll help warm you up. I'll just sit here and wait. If you need anything, just let me know." Mr. Heian looked at her, his heart warmed by her kindness. Yet, still playing the role of a struggling man, he lowered his voice and said hesitantly, I don't have enough money to pay for this meal. I only have a few coins left." Lin simply smiled, shaking her head. "Don't worry about it. Please eat. I'll take care of the payment. What matters is that you eat and feel better." She didn't show any hesitation or annoyance. Calmly, she took the money from her purse and paid for Mr. Heian's meal. When she opened her wallet, however, Lin realized she had very little left. The small amount in her purse would likely be enough to buy her own dinner. Yet without a second thought, she used what little she had to help him. As Mr. Heian ate, Lin sat beside him, her eyes filled with concern. She gently asked, "Do you have family nearby? Anyone who can help you?" Mr. Heian lowered his gaze, feigning sadness. "I live alone. I don't have anyone close to me. I spend my days just getting by. I really appreciate your kindness, though. You're a good person." Lin's heart ached a little at his words, but she didn't respond. Instead, she quietly waited for him to finish. Meanwhile, a few people in the restaurant started whispering among themselves. One man at a nearby table shook his head and muttered to his companion, "What's she doing helping a beggar? They're all pretending to be poor to get money from people." Another person added, "Exactly. Who knows if he's really in need? People like that can be tricksters. She's too trusting." Lynn overheard their conversation, but she didn't let it bother her. She remained focused on Mr. Hyan, her eyes filled with compassion. She didn't let any negativity or judgment distract her from helping him. As Mr. Hyan slowly finished his pho, he was quietly observing Lynn. He was taken aback by her patience and kindness. She wasn't disturbed by the gossip, nor did she show any frustration despite knowing she was helping a complete stranger. When Mr. Hyan was done, Lynn stood up, paid for the meal, and turned back to him with a warm smile. "Do you feel better now? If you need a place to stay for the night, I can help you find somewhere." Mr. Hyan shook his head gently, his expression thoughtful. He had begun to see the sincerity in Lynn's actions, yet he wasn't ready to stop testing her. After a moment, he put his empty bowl down, looked up at Lynn with gratitude in his eyes, but kept his voice uncertain. "You're a good person, but have you ever wondered why you help strangers like me? Why would you go out of your way to help someone you don't even know?" Lynn was surprised by the question, but she smiled and answered gently, "I believe helping others is just what we should do. Everyone faces challenges at some point in life. If I can help today, why not? Maybe someday I'll need help too." Her simple response left Mr. Hyan a little taken aback. He nodded slowly but decided to take things one step further, testing her one last time. "You're truly a good person," he said. "But let me tell you a story. Maybe after you hear it, you'll think twice about helping me." He paused, sighing dramatically as if burdened by a great weight. "I'm from the countryside. I saved up money my whole life to come here for medical treatment, but as soon as I got off the bus, I lost everything. Now I don't have money to go back home, and I don't have enough to see a doctor. What do you think I should do?" Lynn listened carefully, her face a picture of concern. She didn't question the story. Instead, she continued to show him the same warmth and empathy that she had from the start, quietly assessing whether or not she could help him further. Lynn's unwavering kindness, her readiness to help a stranger without expecting anything in return, teaches us the power of selfless love. Do you think you would have reacted the same way? Could you, in the face of doubt, continue to show compassion? We often face moments where we have to choose between trust and skepticism, between helping or turning away. But what if every act of kindness, no matter how small, could make a difference? What kind of world would we live in if we all shared Lynn's heart? Reflect on this story and remember, sometimes the greatest help we can offer is simply being there for someone, even when we don't know what they'll do next. And who knows, one day it may be us who need a little kindness. Lynn stood still for a few moments, her eyes reflecting a brief moment of confusion, but she quickly regained her composure. "Sir, I truly don't have much money, but if you're in need, I can offer a little help. Your health is more important right now. You need to see a doctor first." She finished speaking, then without hesitation opened her wallet. Inside, there were only a few small bills mixed with larger ones tucked into a separate compartment. The total wasn't even 1 million dong. Despite this, she still withdrew every last bit of the money and gently placed it in the elderly man's hand. "Please take this, sir. I know it's not much, but I hope it helps in some way. When you're able to, you can return it. The most important thing is that you take care of your health first." Mr. Hyan held the money in his hands, his emotions overwhelming him. His gratitude was too deep for words. Through his heartfelt gesture and sincere words, Lynn showed that she wasn't just kind-hearted, but also willing to sacrifice for others, even when she herself wasn't wealthy. A few people in the cafe witnessed this scene. Some nodded in admiration, but others whispered among themselves, doubting her. That girl is so naive. How do we know if this old man is really poor? They murmured. But Lynn didn't care about their opinions. She only had eyes for Mr. Hyan, her gaze full of concern. If you need anything else, just let me know. I'll do my best to help, she said kindly. Mr. Hyan sat still for a moment, his frail hands tightly clutching the money Lynn had given him. Finally, he looked up at her, his voice hoarse with emotion. Young lady, I'm truly touched by your kindness, but I have to ask, why are you willing to help a complete stranger like this? Aren't you afraid that I might be deceiving you? Lynn smiled softly and replied with gentle sincerity, Sir, I don't think too much about things like that. If someone truly needs help and I turn my back on them, I'd regret it for the rest of my life. Besides, I believe you are a good person. No one would pretend to be poor and sit here in the cold and hunger like this. Her response left Mr. Hyan speechless. It wasn't just kindness she showed, but faith, trust, and compassion. He began to believe that this girl was truly deserving of becoming a daughter-in-law in his prestigious family. Yet he still wanted to be sure. He wanted to test her patience and her sincerity further. After a brief pause, Mr. Hyan took Lynn's hand. His eyes were full of gratitude as he spoke. You really are a good person. Thank you so much. I promise if I have the chance, I will return this favor. Lynn just smiled and shook her head. Don't think about it too much. Helping others is a natural thing to do. Mr. Hyan sat quietly, gazing at Lynn with a thoughtful expression. Deep inside, he felt reassured, but he still decided to continue with his final test. The next day, Lynn received a call from Min, her boyfriend. He spoke in an excited tone. Lynn, tonight, let's go to Hwangia restaurant. My parents want to meet you to discuss our wedding. Lynn felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. She prepared a formal dress and applied light makeup before heading to the restaurant. As soon as she walked in, she looked around for Min. She quickly spotted him sitting with an older couple, elegant yet warm. Min stood up, waving at her with a bright smile. Lynn, over here. Let me introduce you to my parents. Lynn walked over, bowing politely as she greeted them, but when her gaze met the middle-aged man's eyes, her heart skipped a beat. Her heart seemed to stop. It was him, the old beggar she had met just yesterday. Lynn froze, unable to move, her feet rooted to the ground. She couldn't find the words. The kind old man, now dressed in luxurious attire, stood before her, exuding an air of dignity. He smiled warmly at her, his eyes full of kindness. Do you recognize me? He asked gently. I'm the beggar you helped yesterday. Lynn was caught off guard. She quickly lowered her head in embarrassment, stammering, I'm so sorry, I didn't realize. The old man raised his hand, signaling for her to stop. His voice, soft and reassuring, interrupted her. There's no need to apologize, Lynn. I deliberately didn't want you to recognize me. I did this to test your heart. Lynn looked up in confusion, her eyes filled with surprise. You see, the man continued, I am Min's father, the only son I have. I wanted to be sure that he had chosen the right person to marry. Yesterday, when you helped me without hesitation, without asking for anything in return, I knew you were the one. You showed me that my son's future wife is a person of great kindness and compassion. Lynn's face turned red with embarrassment. She never expected the old beggar to be Min's father, and she certainly never imagined that everything had been a test. She was at a loss for words. I had no idea, she whispered. I really don't know what to say. The old man smiled at her, his gaze full of warmth and understanding. There's no need to say anything, Lynn. Your actions yesterday spoke louder than words ever could. You didn't just help me. You did so with a pure heart, without caring about my circumstances. That is why I am certain that you are the right person for my son. Min, sitting beside her, took her hand firmly, his eyes gleaming with pride. I told you, Dad. Lynn is the kindest person I've ever met. She's not just the woman I love, but the one I want to protect and cherish forever. Min's mother, Mrs. Hyan, smiled softly, her gaze full of warmth. Lynn, don't worry. After hearing everything from my husband yesterday, I was deeply moved by your actions. Our family needs someone like you, someone who is gentle and sincere. Lynn felt a heavy burden lift off her shoulders as she looked at Min and his family. Her eyes welled up with emotion. "Thank you so much," she said, her voice trembling. "I only did what I thought was right. I never imagined it would mean so much to you." The old man chuckled, standing up and patting Lynn on the back. "It means everything, Lynn. My son is very lucky to have found someone like you, just as I was lucky to marry someone as kind and understanding as my wife. She helped me build everything we have today. Yesterday, I saw you not only help me, but also protect my honor in the face of gossip. A daughter-in-law like you is all I could ever hope for." Everyone at the table laughed joyfully. Min looked at Lynn with eyes full of love and said gently, "See, my parents have accepted you. Now we'll build a happy family together." Lynn's heart swelled with emotion at Min's words. She nodded slowly, feeling overwhelmed by the love and warmth surrounding her. The atmosphere in the room grew warmer, filled with laughter and joy. Lynn knew in that moment that she had truly become a part of Min's family. That evening, after dinner, the family gathered at a restaurant that was part of the family's business. When the meal ended, the old man motioned for Lynn to stay behind for a private conversation. With a gentle gaze, he spoke softly. "Lynn," he began, his voice filled with sincerity, "I wanted to talk to you for a moment. I've watched my son grow up, and I've seen many people come and go. But your heart is different. You've proven yourself not just through your actions, but through your character. I have no doubt that you will be a wonderful wife and a wonderful daughter-in-law." Lynn's eyes filled with gratitude as she listened to his words. She felt a deep sense of belonging and knew that her journey with Min and his family was just beginning. "Thank you, my dear, for making me believe that you truly deserve to be Min's lifelong partner from now on." With those heartfelt words, Min's father warmly accepted Lynn as his daughter-in-law. "I also want you to know, Lynn, that the entire family, including all of this estate, will eventually belong to you two," he continued. "I see that you don't just love Min, but you also have a kind and compassionate heart, something rare to find in others." Lynn, moved by his words, lowered her head slightly in acknowledgement, her heart brimming with gratitude. "Thank you, Uncle," she replied softly. "I really don't know how to express my feelings, but I am truly grateful. I'll do my best to always do the right thing, and I love Min with all my heart." Mr. Hyen smiled warmly at her and then turned to Min, his voice full of trust. "Min, my son, I used to worry a lot about whether you had chosen the right person. But now, after seeing your actions, I have no doubts. You found someone who is truly kind-hearted and full of love. That's what matters most in a marriage." He then looked directly at Min with a fatherly gaze. "From now on, you must cherish Lynn, love her and care for her as she has cared for those around her. I believe you found a worthy partner, just as I found your mother." Min nodded, his grip tightening around Lynn's hand, his eyes firm. "Don't worry, Dad. I promise I will never make Lynn sad or disappointed."